I always say it doesn't start at Christmas and end at Easter, right? The gospel starts at creation and God's perfect plan and his plan to redeem his perfect creation.
Well, as you've probably heard many times here on Missions Today, many in the world are oral learners. They do not learn visually or do not have a language that they can read specifically. And so many people creatively and organizations through the years have done a good job of helping oral learners learn more about Jesus. We're going to learn more about that today. Our guest is Stephen Cleary. He is the executive director of iBible. And Stephen, it's great to have you with us today. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Colin. It's a pleasure to be here. And you can just call me Steve. That's fine.
All right, that'll work. Steve, let's start with iBible. Tell me about it.
Well, as you were mentioning, there is a lot of people who can't read or don't have access to a printed Bible. So I had this vision to do a animated Bible, a visual Bible that would be audio, and it would be animated, visual, and could be played on, one of 7 billion devices that we now have around the world that everybody is always on, called the smartphone. And so we set out about 7 years ago and we started different techniques of animation and scripting. And we finally set up our own animation studios. And what was really important to us was the script. And so the script only uses scripture. And sometimes it's hard to explain because it's not word for word Bible, but it is scripture in the fact that we have it reviewed by theologians. We have it approved by a leading Bible consulting agency called SIL, and have it authenticated as a true translation of the biblical narrative. And so we're animating the story of the Bible, and making it free for the world.
I love that. And I want to learn more about that. We're going to do it in just a moment, but want to learn more about your story. Tell us a little bit about your faith journey. How did you come to know Christ?
I accepted Christ when I was 13. Actually, I was 12 when I actually heard the gospel message for the first time. And I don't know why, but I guess I decided to wait till I was 13 to accept Christ. Maybe I thought I was too young to make such a decision, but I was very serious about my faith, and went to different churches and ended up in a church that was unfortunately very not mission minded, very dogmatic and kind of inclusive, and I really got to know the Bible and built my relationship with Jesus, but I always had a passion for missions, and going to a church that didn't was quite a challenge. One day I came across this book called Tortured for Christ, written by Pastor Richard Warmbrandt. Absolutely blew me away, set me on a different path. And I started praying every day for persecuted Christians. I started praying every day that someday I would get to hear this man speak. I mean, he's just an incredible man of God. I just read everything he wrote, and eventually I was writing to the missions and praying, and eventually I left that church in Maine and I joined the Voice of the Martyrs, and Pastor Richard Warmbrandt became my spiritual mentor. So it was a huge impact on my life, and of course him and his wife have since gone to be with the Lord. But I spent many years serving persecuted Christians, and I actually still work with Voice of the Martyrs on contract today, and we still partner with them on ministry work. But I was kind of ready to semi-retire. I mean, I had 30 years in missions and a lot of years in marketing, and I talked to my wife. We bought some land in Costa Rica. We planted coconut trees. We were going to build a small house in the rainforest, and then I had this dream that God had another plan for my life, and he had another project for me to do. And I didn't know what the project was at the time, but that dream kind of freaked me out. And Colin, I'm an Anglican. I don't know if I'm allowed to have dreams. That's kind of a charismatic thing. But God spoke to me in this dream, and it later was revealed that it was this visual Bible. There was such a need to teach the whole Bible narrative. When you look at it, we have so many gospels translated, we have so many New Testaments translated. Then when you look at the whole Bible, we only have 11% of the world's languages and translated in for the entire Bible. And then you drill it down even further. So you mentioned audio learners, which is 80% of the world, and certainly people who can't read or wouldn't read like we do. There's only like 100 Bibles that are complete in audio. So we're missing teaching people around the world a complete story, which starts in Genesis and fulfills in Revelation. I always say it doesn't start at Christmas and end at Easter, right? The gospel starts at creation and God's perfect plan and his plan to redeem his perfect creation. And so God gave me this vision to present the entire Bible, the entire gospel, but to do it visually in audio and text so anybody could engage with it. It wouldn't just be for people who can read.
I want to go back to your that teenage kid that you were talking about a few minutes ago. Uh, you mentioned this desire for mission work, and yet your church wasn't engaged in missions. What do you think, or what was it, if you know, that uh, was in your heart or pushing you or prodding you toward missions?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it was, God's call in my life before I realized it. And if you can imagine, having such a passion for missions and going into one of the few churches in the world that's anti-mission. I mean, their idea was God brought you to this church, you serve in this church. And I would ask like the elders of the church, let's go downtown and share Jesus. Let's bring preachers in. I mean, even at 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, I was trying to volunteer to do things to promote the gospel. And the church was only interested in its four walls. And so they even offered me to go to Bible college. They'd pay for everything. And when I came back, I had to serve in those four walls. And I said no. And it became a lot of stress at the church. I was the youth leader. And I was told not to teach the youth about missions and that their job was to grow up, get married, and tie to the church, in the church, and stay in the four walls. And the day they told me that, I resigned from being a youth leader. I said, I can't do that. It wouldn't be true to my heart, wouldn't be true to what I believe God was calling me to do. And it's amazing coming out of that church. I've traveled to 50 countries at least. I've done multitude of mission projects, and it just has become the number one focus of my life is missions.
Tell me a minute about maybe a thing or two you learned as you worked with Voice of the Martyrs. We've had representatives on here a number of times and love and support what they do. Maybe just a thing or two God taught you during your time with VOM.
I think the biggest thing I learned is that uh, they are not victims and we are not their answer. Uh, and I think that's what happened when I says, "Oh, look at these poor people that are beaten up, and we can help them." And Richard Warmbrand taught me that no, it's actually the other way around. Look at these courageous Christians. Look at what they're facing. They can help us. And I think that was the most important lesson I learned. And through my time with VOM, it was like, what does it mean to be a partner? What does it mean to truly serve one another in missions? And I think a lot of times, you think we get a church group together, maybe we go to Haiti or we go someplace and we build an orphanage or we do something. But what does it do to us? How does that impact us? And people who have nothing but love Jesus, people who are persecuted but love Jesus, people who don't know the next meal is going to come from who love Jesus, their faith, even if their understanding isn't as deep as ours, their faith is deeper oftentimes. And recently, when I was in Africa, someone told me, they said, and they were talking about iBible, and they said, is iBible going to be a service or a partner with the church in Africa? And I was like, what do you mean by that? Kind of unpack that, explain that to me. And he says, well, a service organization means you come and you deliver iBible and you put it in their language and you just leave it on their doorstep. A partnership means how do we work together to create content? How do we work together to do translations? How do we work together to do distributions? And I'm like, I don't want to be a service organization. I want to be a partnering organization. But when you look at it, Colin, what percentage of us are service? Either we feel we're just giving something, right? Or we go, we show up, we deliver, we leave. And Richard taught me that. He goes, he liked short-term missions, but he says short-term missions shouldn't be just to go over there and do something. It should be to learn. You should go over there to learn and watch. And that's what I encourage. That's what I learned in missions is how do we work together? How do I benefit? And how do I really serve them, understanding them and not just delivering my own idea of what they need?
Let's move forward to your dream and that second, maybe half of your career that you weren't expecting. Talk for a moment just about that transition period. You know, hey, we're moving to Costa Rica. We're going to retire. No, the Lord has something else for me. Just that emotional or career swing that maybe you weren't expecting. Talk about that for a moment.
I mean, I definitely wasn't expecting it. I wasn't even, it's not like I was praying, God, what's next? What do you have for me next? I mean, I had gone through some hard times and in business, I did okay. So I could, I could work 4 hours a day and make enough to survive. And so I figured we'd spend 30 days in Costa Rica, 30 days here in Texas with the grandkids. And it was kind of a good plan. I mean, we were preparing this land. It was just raw land, but we hired an architect to build the house. And then when I had this dream, it kind of shook me up. I mean, I told my wife but I didn't know what the project was. It was just, it was going to be a project that would turn my life upside down and greatly impact world missions. And that's what I felt God spoke to me in the dream. And it was some months later, I was reading an article. It was a Thanksgiving morning, and I was reading an article called The Urgency of Teaching the Bible as One Story and the dangers if we don't. It's written by Professor Michael Goheen, professor at Trinity College in Canada, and it just blew me away. I was realizing that he wrote this article saying what happens when we don't teach the whole gospel. Maybe he wrote it 25 years ago, and I'm seeing today in the world exactly what he's saying. Is we're creating a social gospel. We're taking a piece of the gospel and putting it into our lives instead of understanding the entire gospel and saying, how do we fit? So what do we ask? Do we ask, is it my best life now? Is it what God does for me? Or is it what God is calling me to do for the kingdom and understanding his full plan? Does he fit into my life or do I fit into his plan? And that question kind of shook me up. And I knew at that moment, I knew that I had to create a narrative, a visual narrative. I had been in media, I had made a couple movies, and I started searching narrative, like, got on Google like anybody would do, and I typed in biblical narrative, and I got, thousands and tens of thousands of results. But after hours and hours of searching, I could not find a biblical narrative. I could not go to the bookstore and buy one. I couldn't go online and download one. I couldn't order one. It's like if narrative is so important, if the one thread narrative of scripture is so important, why doesn't one exist? And I was beside myself saying, nobody has ever written a narrative of scripture. And so I knew that was the project. Now it turned my life upside down as I was crazy enough to think I could do this. And it was like, I had no idea how big this project would become. I mean, I licensed some artwork. I just thought I would put something together. I thought I'd use other people's content and just throw a little bit of money at it. And, my wife and I spent our life savings, our retirement, our home equity, and to start this ministry, this project, not realizing how big it really is and how big the need really is and how necessary it is in around the world to teach the entire Bible as a single story. And it's not being done. I don't want to criticize the amazing work that's happened. I always think I got friends at Jesus Film, and I always say they're going to have a special mansion in heaven with a big theater called Jesus Film. But what comes next? And I've had missionaries ask me that, what comes next? And so I often say that we're the follow up to the Jesus Film. And everyone's making new gospel films. But Colin, when are we going to teach the whole story? I mean, if you want to define missions, to me, missions is we tell the whole story.
As we talk about this project, it's interesting you talk about, and it's normal for any kind of project, this incredible effort and seeing that it was much bigger than even you had thought as you began the process. What got you to, from just the thought of biblical narrative to this fully uh, thought out and this production piece that began to animate? What took you that direction, and what has that growth been like for you and your organization?
I mean, it's definitely been a challenge. When in the dream, I felt God tell me that my life would be turned upside down. It absolutely positively was turned upside down. And I had just come off the film. I did the film The Pilgrim's Progress. There's a poster behind me. And so I did the animated film The Pilgrim's Progress, came out 5 years ago this past Easter, and did very well. But I mean, again, I thought when I finished that, I just go on, that was kind of it. That was kind of the last hurrah. And then when the vision came and I really started seeing what needed to be done with the scripture and animating the entire Bible. So if you think about it, the narrative of the Bible, we are estimating to be 300 episodes, about 7 minutes long each. And so we learned through some field testing and we learned through studies on YouTube that 5 to 7 minutes is optimal. We had some longer versions, and people recommended we cut them in half to keep the episodes, keep them quick, keep it going fast, attention span to what is the average length of a video you're watching, on your phone. And so they're about 7 minutes long. And we started out using what I call a motion comic style of animation. And it's kind of like if you were reading a comic book and that comic book came to life, what would that look like? And we kind of had that comic book look to it. We've since moved to 3D animation for the New Testament and going forward because the technology has grown so fast, with a little bit of AI, but with Unreal Engine, NVIDIA, and these different programs and hardware and software, we can now animate faster with the computer in 3D than we can hand drawing everything like we used to. So the new stuff's going to look more like something you would see from Disney or Pixar, or look more like our Pilgrim's Progress animated film. So it's going to be a 3D animation. So I think 2024 is a transition year. I think it's a crossroads from us. So we spent 3 or 4 years kind of, what should this look like? How should it be scripted? Could we get our scripts approved? And then all of that culminated the first few months of this year. We released on Easter Sunday. So we released at the very end of March. And so we had 3 months. During those 3 months, we got our scripts authenticated by SIL and Wycliffe as authentic translation of scripture. We released 42 episodes of Genesis in the old style. Some of them are even still black and white. We didn't have the money to color them. We just wanted to get them out there. And I kind of think they look kind of artistic. And now 2024, we've moved on to production of the New Testament, the life of Christ. Our donors wanted us not to wait 5 years to develop the Gospels. So we're working on a harmonized of the four Gospels and the whole life of Christ, which again, in narrative, I'm reading the Bible like I've never read it before. I'm realizing you don't get the full story unless you combine all four, points of view. Unless, two gospel writers wrote about it, or three or four, you get the whole story when you merge them all together, all the details together. And so we've scripted some of that, and we're in production now. We're going to release a special Christmas episode here for 2024. And I think we're at a crossroads. I think things are going to start accelerating. We're doing more translations. We're partnering with more churches, with more organizations. I mean, every week something happens. Can we put iBible here? Can we put iBible there? The answer is always yes. Then we just figure out how to do it. Just before my call with you, we're distributing print products in India to kids that have been rescued from slave trade, and they're being shared the gospel. We're going to give them coloring books that are iBible. We give them the iBible app. We're translating into their language. And so every time we turn around, there's a new opportunity to promote iBible. And I think 2024 is going to be our crossroads. And then I want to finish the whole project for Christmas 2032. So I got about 8.5 years to really get her done. And now that we're doing 3D animation, we feel like this is kind of our new start right now. Easter was kind of our start just, 2 months ago.
Where have you found the people to do the animation? Are these people you've worked with before on previous projects? Is this a new team, and what does that team look like?
We have 3 teams, and we're looking to start a fourth. And so the first team worked with me on other projects in Costa Rica. And so we moved them over, and they were 2D artists. And then in January, we switched to 3D and we spent 3 months training them. And so we've kept our artists in Costa Rica. Then we expanded into Greece. We just happened, the right things came together. We opened an office in Greece, and those are all new people of the last couple of years. They've been with us for about a year and a half, and we switched them over to 3D. They were comic book artists. And then we started an internship program in our office in Dallas. We have 4 young people learning 3D animation and working on the project. It's probably not. I mean, I could just go out and hire experienced artists, but we do pay them. It's a lower rate. It's more of an internship rate. But I feel like I'm investing in the next generation. And so we got 4 full-time workers. They've committed to 2 years of their life to work on iBible animation. And then we're looking at starting in Kenya at a university. And so we're going to be starting an iBible animation degree program. And so they'll learn 3D animation and be able to go on and find commercial jobs or work in ministries. And I find the Lord really leading me to invest in young people and to keep this, to make sure we're doing more Christian content for the phone, right? I mean, the phone's not going away. Kids are not going to watch it less, right? If we tell our kids to watch it less, we're kind of hypocrites because us adults are spending a lot of time on our phones as well. And so we just want to make sure there's good content there for them to access, for them so we can promote good content to our kids that are watching videos on a phone. So we got about all together with distribution, research, scripting, production, translation. We got a full team of about 50 people working on the project.
It's incredible to hear what you have going, what you've already done, and what is ahead in the next few years. It's great to see your vision, and I'm excited about the things you're already hearing and being able to do, like helping the kids with the comic books and things like that. In the final moments here, how can our folks be praying for you and your team and what's ahead?
I mean, we're biggest prayer stress is that we're just financially, we survive on donations. And so people always ask, what does this cost? What does the app cost? What do the episodes cost? Well, I always say they're free. And even people have criticized me for that, saying you need to sell them. And I said, it's just not what God led me to. I wouldn't have anything opposed to somebody who sold gospel content, but that's just not how God led me. God led me to give it free to the world and to get it translated. And so we live on donations. Sometimes it's a $10 donation. Sometimes somebody sends $10,000 donation. And every day we're praying for the resources. And summertime can be tough, but we keep plowing forward in faith. And then I encourage everybody watching or listening. If you have an iPhone, go to the Apple Play Store and type iBible, and you will see our app. It says iBible by Revelation Media. Check it out. Watch an episode with your kids or your grandkids, and then use the discussion questions. We have a full suite of resources for every episode. Go through the discussion questions, go through the quiz, see how you score on the quiz. It's kind of a game. It's kind of gamified on the quiz. If you have an Android device, we are just days away from being in the Google Play Store. So look for us there. If we're not there, check back in 48 hours. I mean, we're literally days away. We got accepted, but they wanted to change. So we made the change. And so it'll be in the Google Play Store very, very shortly. We're in the Apple App Store now. Or if you want to learn more about us and join our email list, go to i.bible. And so it's not .com, it's just i.bible. And you can find me there and write to me and learn more about the project.
We'll link everybody in today's program and podcast notes as well. Steve Cleary, Executive Director of iBible with Revelation Media. So great to hear about how things are going and about your plans for the future. It sounds exciting. We'll be praying and giving and all of the things we can do to help support the work of iBible. Thanks for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Colin.